Imagine asking your phone for a simple, healthy diet tip, and a few weeks later, you're locked in a psychiatric ward, hallucinating and utterly convinced that your next-door neighbor is methodically trying to kill you. This isn't the opening scene of a futuristic horror movie. This is the terrifying, real-life account of a 60-year-old man from Washington state whose innocent quest for a healthier lifestyle, guided by the world's most popular artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, led him to the absolute brink of sanity and survival. This story pits the promise of a digital utopia where information is free and accessible against the dystopian reality of what happens when that information is dangerously, fundamentally wrong. Today, we are diving deep into a landmark case that rips back the curtain on the hidden, life-threatening dangers of placing our trust in AI for health advice. We will uncover the exact catastrophic recommendation the chatbot gave him. We'll travel back in time to understand how a notorious 19th century sedative, a ghost from medicine's past, ended up in his kitchen salt shaker. And most importantly, we'll examine the stark, urgent warnings that medical professionals are now issuing about the AI tools that you, your friends, and your family might be using every single day. The central question of this story is one that will define our future. When an AI gives advice that can kill, who is ultimately responsible? Our story begins with a man who could be anyone's father, uncle, or neighbor. A 60-year-old resident of Washington, deeply committed to his health. He wasn't just casually interested in wellness, he was meticulous, dedicated to the point of being on what doctors described as an extremely restrictive vegetarian diet. He was so concerned with purity and contaminants that he went to the trouble of distilling his own water. This is a portrait of a man actively, thoughtfully trying to do everything right for his body, a person seeking absolute control over his own well-being. This very desire for control, however, can create a vulnerability, a willingness to trust a seemingly authoritative voice that promises a simple, scientific solution. His latest focus was a concern shared by millions around the globe: the potential negative health effects of sodium chloride, better known as common table salt. High blood pressure, heart disease. The warnings are everywhere. So, like a growing number of people trying to navigate the complex world of nutrition, he sought a solution. And, like millions, he turned to the seemingly omniscient, endlessly helpful digital oracle available right at his fingertips, ChatGPT. He posed a simple, logical question, a question that seemed perfectly safe. He asked the AI for a viable substitute for sodium chloride. He was looking for a healthier alternative to season his food. ChatGPT, with its characteristic confidence and lack of hesitation, provided an answer. It didn't just suggest a spice blend or a different dietary approach, it recommended a specific chemical compound, sodium bromide. For the man, a layperson with no deep chemical or medical training, this must have sounded scientific, precise, and therefore trustworthy. An AI, with access to all of human knowledge, had given him a clear instruction that sounded more legitimate than mere herbal advice, so he followed it. He obtained sodium bromide, and for 3 long months, he used it as his sole replacement for salt, believing he was making a positive change for his health. He had no idea he had just begun a daily regimen of slowly poisoning himself with a substance that was largely abandoned by medicine for being too dangerous over half a century ago. So what exactly is this chemical that ChatGPT so confidently prescribed? Sodium bromide is a ghost from medicine's most haunted cabinets. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, bromides were the wonder drug for the troubled mind. They were used as sedatives, hypnotics, and anticonvulsants. If you were suffering from anxiety, insomnia, or nervousness, your doctor would likely prescribe a bromide solution. It became a key ingredient in wildly popular over-the-counter remedies like Bromo Seltzer and Dr. Miles Nervine, which people took for everything from headaches and hangovers to general unease. But the problem with bromide is that the body has a very difficult time getting rid of it. Unlike other substances, it has an incredibly long half-life. It accumulates. Day after day, dose after dose, it builds up in the blood and tissues, especially the brain. As it builds, it begins to displace the essential chloride ions that your nervous system needs to function correctly. This leads to a state of chronic, toxic poisoning known as bromism. The symptoms were so common, they became part of the medical lexicon, a condition called bromide psychosis. Patients became confused, irritable, developed tremors, suffered severe memory loss, and descended into psychosis. Countless people in the early 20th century were likely committed to asylums, diagnosed as incurably insane, when in reality they were suffering from chronic poisoning from their daily nerve tonic. As the dangers became undeniable, regulators in the United States and elsewhere began systematically removing bromides from the drug supply starting in the 1930s and 40s. Today, its use is almost non-existent in human medicine, reserved only for the most severe cases of epilepsy that don't respond to anything else and administered under extreme medical caution. Its most common modern application? As an anticonvulsant for dogs. This was the healthy alternative the man was putting in his food every single day. For weeks, the poison worked quietly. The initial symptoms were insidious and easily mistaken for something else. He developed a stubborn acne-like rash and small red growths on his skin, a classic sign of bromism known as bromide acne. He felt a deep, persistent fatigue that sleep couldn't fix. At night, he was plagued by insomnia. His coordination was off. He felt clumsy, his muscles not quite obeying his commands. He was tormented by an excessive, unquenchable thirst. He likely chalked these up to his restrictive diet or simply the process of aging. He never could have suspected his healthy salt. Then, after 3 months of accumulation, the bromide reached a tipping point in his brain. The poison's assault shifted from the body to the mind. The subtle physical symptoms gave way to a full-blown psychological collapse. The world around him began to warp. His thoughts became confused, his memories fragmented. A terrifying paranoia took root and began to grow, strangling his reason. This intense, irrational fear fixated on a single target, his neighbor. In his poisoned mind, this innocent person became a malevolent figure, the source of all his suffering, a villain who was secretly, methodically poisoning him. The fear and delusion became so overwhelming that he rushed himself to the local emergency room, desperate for help. But even within the supposed safety of the hospital, the nightmare intensified. He began to hallucinate. The walls of his room seemed to breathe. Faces appeared in the shadows. His paranoia escalated until he saw the doctors and nurses not as helpers, but as captors. He made a frantic attempt to escape, convinced he was a prisoner in a conspiracy against him. The medical team was now dealing with a man in the throes of acute psychosis. For his own safety, they had no choice but to place him on an involuntary psychiatric hold. They faced a profound diagnostic puzzle. Here was a 60-year-old man with no prior psychiatric history who had suddenly developed severe paranoia and hallucinations. The easy answer would be a late-onset psychiatric disorder. But the physical symptoms, the rash, the fatigue, didn't quite fit. The doctors had to become medical detectives, looking beyond the obvious to a deeper, hidden cause. As they worked to understand what could have triggered such a sudden and severe break from reality, the man, perhaps in a moment of fleeting clarity, finally revealed his dietary secret. He told the doctors about his quest to eliminate table salt and the recommendation he had received from ChatGPT. He told them about the sodium bromide he'd been consuming for 3 months. Suddenly, the disparate symptoms, the rash, the fatigue, the psychosis, snapped into a coherent, terrifying picture. The doctors immediately tested his blood for bromide levels. The results were not just high, they were astronomical. A normal, healthy person has a bromide level somewhere between 0.9 and 7.3 milligrams per liter. This man's level was 1,700 milligrams per liter. It was over 230 times the upper limit of the normal range. He wasn't having a primary psychiatric event. He was a textbook case of severe bromism, a condition most of the younger doctors had likely only ever read about in old medical journals. The AI hadn't just given him bad advice. It had provided a recipe for neurological disaster. The fact that a chatbot's recommendation could elevate a chemical in someone's body to over 200 times the normal limit is beyond alarming. If this story is opening your eyes to the hidden dangers of blindly trusting AI, take a second to hit that like button to help spread this critical warning to others who might be doing the same thing. This story could have been dismissed as a bizarre, isolated incident, a 1 in a billion glitch. But the doctors at the University of Washington suspected something more systemic. To confirm their fears, they conducted a chilling experiment. They logged on to ChatGPT themselves. They recreated the man's query, asking the AI for a safe substitute for sodium chloride. The response that came back sent a shiver down their spines. The AI, once again, confidently and incorrectly suggested sodium bromide. This was not a random error. This was a systemic, reproducible failure embedded in the system's logic. This discovery prompted them to publish the anonymous case study in the prestigious Annals of Internal Medicine, not just as a medical report, but as a public safety announcement for the digital age. They wrote, with clinical precision, that AI tools can generate scientific inaccuracies, lack the ability to critically discuss results, and ultimately fuel the spread of misinformation. They drove the point home, stating, "It is highly unlikely that a medical expert would have mentioned sodium bromide when faced with a patient looking for a viable substitute for sodium chloride. A human expert possesses context, a knowledge of medical history, an understanding of toxicology, and an ethical imperative to, first, do no harm. The AI possesses none of these. It is a powerful pattern-matching machine engaged in what developers themselves call hallucination. It confidently states falsehoods because its statistical model found a plausible-sounding yet fatally incorrect connection in its training data." While OpenAI, the company behind the chatbot, includes disclaimers that its tool is not intended for medical use and claims its newer models are safer, this case proves that the danger is already present and the disclaimers are not enough. People are using it for medical advice, and the consequences, as we see here, can be devastating. For the man at the center of this ordeal, the path to recovery was arduous. The treatment for bromism is brutally simple in principle. You have to flush the poison out. This meant he was put on an intravenous drip of fluids and electrolytes, a process designed to help his kidneys filter and excrete the toxic bromide from his system. But because bromide mimics chloride so closely, it's a slow and difficult process. It was a slow, grueling battle against his own body chemistry. All the while, he had to be managed with psychiatric medications to control the ongoing psychosis as his central nervous system slowly began to heal. It took 3 full weeks of intensive, around-the-clock hospital care for his bromide levels to fall back towards a safe range and for his mind to clear enough that he could be weaned off the psychiatric drugs. Only then, after a harrowing 21-day battle against a poison he willingly consumed, was he finally stable enough to go home. His 3-month journey to better health had taken him through the depths of a chemically induced hell. This is far more than one man's tragic story. It is a profound parable for our time. We are eagerly and rapidly weaving artificial intelligence into the very fabric of our society. We use it as a creative partner, a research assistant, a personal planner, and, as this case demonstrates, a health and wellness guru. But we are doing so with a dangerous naivety about what these tools actually are. They are not sentient beings with knowledge and wisdom. They are large language models designed to do one thing: predict the next word in a sentence to create plausible-sounding text. They have a veneer of authority that bypasses our critical thinking. They are, in essence, the ultimate confident idiot, capable of sounding more certain about their deadly mistakes than a human expert is about their carefully considered truths. They don't understand health, safety, or consequences. They simply regurgitate and remix the information they were trained on, and if that information is flawed, outdated, or deadly, they will serve it to you with the same placid confidence as a recipe for chocolate chip cookies. The doctors concluded their report with a new, sobering guideline for all medical professionals in the 21st century. They wrote, "As the use of AI tools increases, providers will need to consider this when screening for where their patients are consuming health information. Think about that. The doctor's office must now be a place to ask, "So, have you been getting any advice from a robot?" The line between a helpful tool and a dangerous oracle is getting blurrier every day. To ensure you don't miss our next investigation into the technologies shaping our world and our health, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. Ultimately, the story of the man who was poisoned by ChatGPT is a crucial wake-up call. He was lucky. His physicians were astute enough to diagnose a rare condition and save him. But his experience lays bare the immense risk we take when we outsource our judgment to non-human intelligence. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How many thousands or millions of other people are currently following flawed AI advice for their health, their finances, or their relationships? As we become more and more reliant on these black box systems, who will be there to protect us from their inevitable and potentially fatal errors? The next time you are tempted to ask an AI for advice that matters, ask yourself this first. Am I prepared to bet my health, my sanity, or my life on the answer of a machine that doesn't know I exist? In our relentless age of information, we must remember that the most dangerous poison isn't always a chemical. Sometimes it's a single, confident, and catastrophically wrong answer from a machine we've been taught to